Right, so I'm here with my mate Lourens, and we went for lunch earlier and we got chatting about ethics in business and ethics in tech. And I was telling a story about when we first started Onnit Studio, and one of our first clients, and certainly our first decent paying clients, good 6-figure project. After 4 months of working on it, we gave them all their money back and we refused to go into production because we weren't confident, or weren't comfortable rather, with the fact that they wanted this ad done in a certain way that in our minds breached our ethics on a number of different ways. So we were faced with the dilemma of actually saying, well, you know what, then we've got to give the money back, because at that point we chose, and we got faced with it so early, and we hadn't built up a war chest and a cash flow, and we had to decide there and then, do we stick to what we say or do we put our money where our mouth is? And we gave them all their money back, and we had to absorb all the costs of the freelancers and our own time that we had put into the project, and we made a loss on this project that was kind of going to help us get going. But it really cemented for us that we are going to be an ethical company. We're an ad agency that doesn't amplify voices or things in the market that we don't believe in. And if we stick to that and we believe in it, then we have to make those tough choices, and guaranteed it's not our first. I would have loved to have not been faced with it literally as one of our first projects, but you know, I'm proud to say that we did that. And then, you know, you were telling me about ethics in tech.
Yes.
And I mean,
or the lack thereof.
well, yeah, exactly. I mean, and we've seen it come out in documentaries, and we've seen the consequences of it. We've seen the Elizabeth Holmes documentaries and the likes, and yet from what I hear from you, it seems like that's kind of commonplace.
Yeah, it's everywhere.
Yeah.
Back to your point, I think also once you make the decision between do we stand for what we stand, or do we like compromise on this? I think as soon as you make that compromise, second time around it's even harder to stand for what you believe in. So doing it the first time around is such a ballsy move. So I applaud you and your team for doing that. But ethics in tech, I think especially in South Africa at the moment, we've seen what America does. I've also consulted for some international companies that I tried to drag you in as well, and we're just trying to copy what they do, because we see the things that they develop as beneficial for the company, and we don't put the person at the other end of the screen first.
Yeah.
So we focus on ensuring that whatever subconscious bias things we can implement, like some of the biggest booking sites in the world, they implement. There's only 2 left. I mean, there's definitely not only 2 left. They're just trying to make you feel like if you don't do it now, you'll never be able to do it.
Yeah. Still, they're caching a cookie that says, okay, if this person leaves the site and then comes back, push the ticket price up of the flight or something like that.
Yeah.
Because then me as a user, I go, oh, the prices are going up. There's a sense of urgency now, but they've just created that to try and get me to buy as quickly as possible.
Yeah, and humans are easily tricked, I think.
Yeah.
Because just the fact that we went on the site, use this airplane ticket as an example, went on the site, looked at the airplane ticket, looked again, oh, it increased, and immediately my mind changed from maybe I'll buy and go on this trip to shit, if I don't buy now, it's going to be even more expensive, so now I have to make the choice.
Or I can lose out completely.
Or I can lose out. It's like fear that they instill.
Yeah.
And that's quite It's quite mean.
Yeah, well,
It's manipulative. It's manipulative. They lie to everyone. And the shitty thing is, and why I'm struggling with it is, I was a part of that whole thing. I mean, even with the UK company that I work for, the instruction was clearly get people back onto the app. I want them on the app every single day.
Yeah.
That was the instruction.
Yeah.
And I had to find ways to make it work.
And I think what in those scenarios that kind of makes it worse is, it's one thing to say get that person back on the app, because that's going to lead them to more likely make better choices, or help them improve their, if I think of apps where that could work and it's legit, something like Duolingo, if you get me to practice a bit of French every day, well then that's a great reason to get me back, because I'm going to have a far better learning experience and I'm going to progress a lot better. But that's very different to get on here as often as possible because I'm going to spend money,
money that
or
I
get
don't
into
have,
debt, or
money that I'm not willing to spend right now. But this platform, I thought about it earlier. There's a line between getting people back into the app because they need to achieve something. But that's essentially why we created like these amazing technologies, is to assist our daily tasks.
Yeah.
So an app is supposed to make my life easier in some kind of way. But now we have optimized, and as I said to you earlier, I think optimize is like the root of all evil in modern society, because we don't think at what cost do we optimize.
Yeah.
And
because the expense just shifts somewhere in terms of the optimization model.
Yeah. And we have shifted technology, especially software, from helping us to achieve a goal to enslaving us. Dependency.
Yeah.
It's not helping me achieve a task, it's making me dependent on the software to achieve the task.
Yeah.
And now I've come to a place where I consult for a lot of companies, a lot of different ones, a lot of great ones, a lot of not so great ones, and I'm faced with the question of how do I tackle this reality of dependency that we've created, and how do you shift that to make sure that technology is an aid for what we want to achieve and not something that we should be dependent. Yeah, so that's kind of it's a like daily struggle. I have to work with customers that don't fit my view of how we should use technology to better our lives, and how do I convince these customers without losing their business, because for some other reason we need the money to put the food on the table.
Well, yeah.
And
that's the bigger platform
that
we're enslaved to.
that's the bigger circle of death. And I struggle every single day to wake up, be like, okay, I have to do my job. I've become quite like competent at it.
Yeah.
But I struggle with going to bed and like saying that I did a good job,
Yeah. So there's a difference between competence and whether or not it's serving a better purpose. There's another interesting thing that I found. So I was in Estonia for the Latitude 59 conference, startup conference a while ago, and out of that stable, or out of that country rather, one of their unicorns is it was taxified by Bolt. And we've seen in the press now all sorts of issues, and they're catching some flack. But what's interesting for me is that what works in one country doesn't necessarily work in another. So one of the ways they work there, or one of the reasons they work so well there, is because, well, there's pretty much no crime. But if you take that exact platform and you just scale it through the world, it does become difficult to harness the platform scale effect when territories are so different.
Yeah.
So I guess there is an element of tech is hard as well. to get it right and to scale it and to get it to a point.
Definitely. I mean, you get lost in the thick of it, and
Yeah.
you don't realize what you do. I don't think most people in tech have bad intentions to trick people. I think there are companies that do that.
Yeah, absolutely. But I would say most, especially in the startup space, I think they almost always are trying to better the world, and often off like a personal experience. Like, I'm sick of being ripped off by taxi drivers, therefore I'm going to create a platform that handles fee sharing and all the financial side of it, so that people can't get tricked.
Yeah.
That's a pretty noble starting point.
It's a great starting point. And then somewhere along the line with the execution, we don't consider, and I think this isn't like something that's specific to software. I think it's with all innovations and progress, we see progress, and that's all we see. We don't see what are the negatives that come with this progress.
Yeah.
How do we, if we take something out of a process, we optimize some kind of thing, we remove something, how do we put the opposite back? How do we restore the balance? I don't have a specific example now, but
yeah, I think, and then the other way that works is if we optimize it here, who pays the bill?
Yeah.
Because we often look at, okay, we can reduce the cost to the consumer, but what we've done is we've squeezed the supplier. Because we've squeezed the supplier, it means that, do they now not service their car as often? Do they find a shortcut? And ultimately, is the consumer now at higher risk without knowing it? Or is it the supplier doesn't pay their workers as much? Or, some way
most practical example.
That thing's going to be, bill has to be paid for that optimization if it's not done correctly.
And it's not necessarily always in the software industry that bill is paid, which makes it even harder to assess what impact your decisions in software has on everything. A great example is when your food's delivered, you are guaranteed a certain time, which is amazing. We've created, it's so complex to get groceries or some kind of food item to your house. If you just invest in like what is involved, it's like 5 companies or 6 companies that have to integrate to one another to get food from there to your house.
Yeah.
And the subsequent result of optimizing the thing, you can get your food in a certain amount of time, is the people on the motorcycles, they are pressured, and now they drive like mad people and they get into accidents and they die.
Yeah. Because
of this feature that was probably intended to make customers feel safe and say, okay, cool, you're going to get your food on time. You don't have to worry too long. It's going to take you less petrol, less time. We're saving you time.
Yes.
We have good intentions, but now the poor guy that's making the least amount of money on this entire thing is the guy that dies.
He's
pays.
the guy carrying all the risk.
Yeah.
Okay, so here's a question.
Yes.
So we know that all of this happens and that it's often from good intentions, and I guess it seems to happen post scaling. So businesses scale, and at that point there's a lot of investor interest, there's a lot of money at play, people need returns, funds, and it seems at that point is when people really start to squeeze out the cents, and they're optimizing hard, and this is where some of this stuff starts to happen. What can be done? Like what needs to start to shift? What needs to start to change so that we can get to a point where this isn't happening as much, and ideally that we start to turn the whole thing? Because at the end of the day, we can always turn around and blame ourselves, and you go, well, then don't do it.
Yeah.
We are always, as consumers, the demand drivers, and if we drive the demand, we accept what's being done.
Yeah.
If you buy something, you take on knowingly, and if you can't just plead ignorance and say, well, I had no idea that happened.
So many people do though. It's sad.
So where do you reckon you can start to turn these things around? Like, what do companies need to do? What do consumers need to do? How do we start to, I guess, put the ethics back into tech?
So there's a lot of frameworks in psychology around reward systems and how a positive reward can very easily go into a very negative space and create that dependency. So there are frameworks, and at our company we're trying to implement them. But I think it starts with, I don't have all the answers yet. I don't have a playbook yet,
but that's what we're exploring.
Yeah. So soundboarding with you, I think it starts with, we need to hold people accountable to some kind of level of, if you implement a certain system, these are the things you need to consider from an ethics standpoint. And it's not like this bullshit offsetting of responsibility that you told me about. People have to do it.
Yeah, it's not buying carbon credits.
Yeah,
it's about doing good by the earth.
Yeah, let's buy some ethics credits.
Yeah, it's bullshit. This is real.
It starts with accountability, where the people, not the corporations, need to decide what is the acceptable standard that companies need to adhere to. Now I'm going on a tangent here, I don't really know what I'm saying, but some kind of rating system that says this company has a bad rating system on ethics, so we suggest that people shouldn't use them.
Yeah.
You gave the example of you gave that children example and how parents are concerned about their children, and I'm thinking about my sister. Thinking about my sister and how their children, who are 1 and 2 years old, have iPads and a bunch of devices and apps that teach them things, and how in 20, 30 years time, how is that early stage dependency on software going to influence their decision making, their ethics, their moral?
Do they have a chance?
Do they have a chance? Yeah. I mean, they're just thrown into this, similar to things we were thrown into.
Sure.
But I think this is such a big issue. If I speak to anyone that I've worked with in tech, they all say the same thing: is how have we not spoken about this?
Yeah.
How everyone feels the same way, but everyone just needs to work. I know tech friends that have multiple jobs, developers that are making crazy amount of money, but they just have to have 3 jobs to just survive.
Yeah.
And they don't have the time to consider these ethics. Which isn't a great ending point for this for my point, but
I guess the point here is that we're not necessarily looking for a happy ending.
Nah.
There's a soundbite.
Turn you on.
I guess it's more about starting a bit of a conversation around that, and we need to keep it going. So.
Find like-minded people and get adoption.
Amplify it.
Yes.
So I mean, this is the starting point for us, and I'm stoked that you
thank you.
Gave me some time at the last second. We're starting events here quite soon, and I think I'd love it if you could come back next time you're in Cape Town and maybe present to one of these. We'll get a group of parents out here. And then they can start to look for what they need to be able to
what are the indicators,
in their children and in the tech and the apps and all of that their kids use.
Yeah, and luckily there are things in place for mobile phone manufacturers that have things in place that you can action on to make it safer for people.
Yeah.
I watched a YouTube video the other day of what Apple tracks. And there's a place in settings where you can go to see the logs, and it's, you clicked on this application at that time, at that day, visited these websites.
And your battery level was this.
And your battery, they record everything.
Yeah.
So much information. And we wonder why they know so much, why I walk into, or why I go on Instagram and immediately whatever I've talked about 5 minutes ago pops up on my feed.
Yeah,
it's because they know everything.
Just got too much data.
Yeah.
Anyway, thanks for coming in. I know you have to rush off to
meeting.
And that battery's about to die, so that's a good time for us to wrap up. Thanks, my mate.